In today's video, we're going to tie a bonefish fly called the Simram. It's a bonefish fly that's been around for quite a while now, probably almost 20-30 years or so. Still a very relevant fly today though, still fishes very good for bonefish and all kinds of areas. First thing we're going to do is start with the Gamakatsu SC15 hook, and either a 1 or a 2, just one of those larger-ish kind of sizes. You don't want to tie this fly too small. It's meant to be kind of a larger shrimp pattern. I like to tie it in about a size 1. We're going to take some UTC 140 thread or some 6/0 equivalent. I like to use pink. You can use orange, use shell pink. Any type of those bonefishy kind of bright shrimpy colors will work. And we're just going to lay down a quick thread base on the shank of the hook. Now this fly is completely tied backwards compared to your typical Gotcha or Crazy Charlie. The eyes, we're going to use just some pseudo eyes here. They're actually tied at the back of the shank of the hook. So we're going to take our thread here, and right where the shank kind of starts to bend, we're going to tie in, oopsie, just dropped them. Let's try that again. We're going to tie in our pseudo eyes. You can also use lead eyes, you can use painted eyes, you can use brass eyes. You can tie this lighter as well. Use like a pair of bead chain eyes for shallower bonefish. So we just take those eyes, and we're just going to take some kind of X wraps around those eyes, and then I go underneath, really tight thread wraps. And then I'll do another set of X wraps around those eyes, and again, just kind of parachute around the base of those, and that kind of locks them in place. Then you can put some super glue on there to really lock those eyes in place. Then I take my thread and I tie a little bit down the bend there. And we're going to take some pearl crystal flash. And I only like to use 4 or 5 strands or so. You want to be real careful not to overdo it with this fly. It's pretty easy to tie in too much material and make this fly too chunky or too bulky. So I just tie those in right on top of the shank of the hook. That'll be our first material. Now we're ready for kind of the tail. And for this you can use a bunch of different materials. Back when this fly was invented, I think craft fur was probably the only thing available. I like to use some polar fiber. It's just my little twist. It's a little bit more translucent, a little more supple. You can also use pseudo hair, another more supple pattern, or you can stick with the traditional craft fur. You can also use rabbit for the tail, just as we're going to use on the front of the fly. Any of those materials will work just fine, and I guarantee a bonefish will eat it with any of those materials. So we're going to tie in a section that's about twice as long as the shank of the hook. We're going to tie this in right here at the back of the fly, all the way to where I tied in that crystal flash. And you can leave it just like that, or you can take a marker and bar it up, whatever your preference is. A lot of the traditional ones I've seen, they're just tied just like this, unbarred. Now the next material is going to be some pearl flat braid. I tie that in just along the side of the shank of the hook. Then we're going to jump our thread to just in front of those pseudo eyes. And I'm going to take this pearl crystal flash, I'm going to wrap kind of through the eyes and through the body a couple of times, not to overdo it, but I like to make these flies really durable, so I just kind of do a few wraps around everybody. Then we can capture that pearl flat braid, and I make a few wraps forward. Then I'm going to pull that flat braid up straight back over the top of the fly, and I'm going to wrap back up on it. I want to get this flat braid centered along the top of the shank of the hook because we're going to pull it forward at the very end here. So make sure it's centered, lock it down. I'm kind of overdoing it with my thread wraps. You don't really need to do this many. Then we're going to make a dubbing loop, kind of a a technique that's used a lot in trout flies. I'm going to only make my dubbing loop about 3 inches long. There's other ways to do this, but I found that this is the quickest and dirtiest way to do it on this fly. Then you're going to use your dubbing loop spinner. I like to use one that kind of has the split wires that holds your dubbing loop open. And then when you want to close the dubbing loop, you just pull, and those wires kind of pull together. So I'm just going to set it in my dubbing loop just to hold it open. Then we're going to cut a piece of tan rabbit. You want to make sure it's zonkered, which means that the fibers all stand straight off the strip and not to the side. You want it just like a mohawk, just straight off the top. And we're going to cut a section that's just a little shorter than our dubbing loop. And then what I like to do is kind of stroke the fibers back and stand them all up. This is the trickiest part to tying this fly. It takes a little bit of practice. You can use little bulldog clips or petagene tools. You can use any of those. They all work fine. It's just another step in the process, I feel like, though. I like to tie these fast and quick. So I kind of take some shortcuts and fly by the seat of my pants sometimes. So I'm just going to take this entire zonker strip, I'm going to shove it in my dubbing loop so that all the fibers hang off one side and the leather strip off the other. And then I'll close the dubbing loop with my fingers once I get everybody kind of situated there. And I'm going to sneak in here with my scissors. I'm just going to very carefully trim out all that rabbit zonker strip. If I can get everybody to cooperate here. So I just come in here and trim out that zonker strip. Now you got to be real careful not to bump those fibers, because if you do, you can pretty easily misalign them. Now some wax really helps. I did skip that step just because I kind of got lazy and I'm fast and I'm flying by the seat of my pants here. But you can use some wax. That'll help those fibers stick a little bit. Once you have those fibers trapped, you're just going to take your dubbing twister, and I like to kind of slowly spin it at first. And once all those fibers get kind of twirled and captured, then you can really ramp it up with the spinning and make sure that they're all locked down. Then I like to clip in with a pair of hackle pliers here. There we go. Just makes it a little easier to wrap. Now you can kind of wet your fingers and kind of coax the fibers around. You can brush them, tease them out. But once you have it nice and pretty and all those fibers are standing up, you're ready to take your first wrap right here in front of all that flat braid. And with each wrap, I kind of coax the fibers back with my fingers. Now it's going to look a little bit like a mad scientist kind of hairdo here. Just keep going with it. We'll clean it all up at the end. You want to make sure that you don't trap too many fibers, though. You want to get it as clean as possible. But don't worry if it looks like a mad scientist. Like I said, it's going to be a little crazy at first. Once you have everybody captured, you can trim out the end of your dubbing loop. And then what I like to do is kind of coax all the fibers back and just clean up the head before I move forward. So I just lay down a few wraps right up there by the eye. Like I said, it looks a little crazy, but this is where we're going to give it a little bit of style. We're going to take all these fibers and we're going to split them down the middle on the top of the fly. And you can wet your fingers, use a little wax, and just kind of coax everybody down, kind of like you're giving them a beard or something like that. Just all coax down. Then we can take our fiber, or our flat braid fiber here, and we're going to pull it right over the top. I'm going to capture it to wrap a thread. And that'll help keep all those rabbit fibers in check. Trim out that flat braid. Now we can whip finish, and I kind of use my whip finish to clean up the entire head. So that means I usually do a few more wraps than I would on a trout fly or smaller fly, because I kind of use it to cover up anything. And now we need to also trim our pearl crystal flash. You can't really see it here on camera, but I'm going to trim it just longer than my tail. That way those little tips of the crystal flash kind of wave in the current. And that is a Simram, and the fly kind of rides in the current just like so, just kind of upside down. All this rabbit kind of pulses and just sweeps with the tide, really triggering those bonefish to take. And that's all there is to the Simram. It's kind of a tricky fly to do just because of that rabbit at the end. There's other ways to do it. You can actually just tie in your zonker strip and just kind of collar it around. The only downside to that is that hide really takes up a lot of room on the head and makes it kind of extra bulky for no reason. So that's why I like to use the dubbing loop, because it gets rid of all that bulk. But very effective fly, a lot of movement, a lot of life to this fly. It's caught a lot of bonefish over the years, and that is the Simram.